Chapter 4 Priorities and Total Commitment. A reporter once asked me how I would like to be remembered. I answered, I think I'd like to be remembered as one who kept my priorities in the right order. We live in a changing world, but we need to be reminded that the important things have not changed. The important things will not change if we keep our priorities in proper order. When World War II ended, my brother Ben and I decided we wanted to go into the restaurant business. Ben had all of the restaurant experience between us, a short time working at the university near Georgia Tech campus. A friend of mine in College Park, Prince Morton, operated a Dutch kitchen, a 24-hour restaurant, and through him we learned an opportunity with a new restaurant company called Litter House. In the years following the war, the several restaurant companies had opened hundreds of small diners across the country. Among the most successful was Toddler House out of Memphis, which had 151 restaurants in 1946 and was growing quickly. Toddler House built a tiny 10-stool restaurant that could be operated by a grill man, a waitress, and a dishwasher. The menu offered little more than breakfast items, hamburger, dessert, and customers knew they would get in and out in about 20 minutes in any time of the day or night, 7 days a week. Other companies followed the Toddler model in the designing their 24-hour restaurant, including the owner of the Dutch Kitchen, who was creating the Litter House restaurant chain. Ben and I each wanted a Litter House franchise, and we understood from the owner that we would get them following a training period. So for 7 weeks, we worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week in training. At the end of our training, the owner of Litter House restaurant told Ben and me that we could share a restaurant, but we could not have each have one. We felt that was less than what we had been promised, so we decided to strike out of our own. Neither Ben nor I had much money, but we were determined. I sold my recently purchased Chevrolet, and we pooled our resources to come up with $4,000. Then we borrowed $6,600 from the First National Bank of Atlanta, and we were naive enough to think that $10,600 could buy any parts of the world we wanted. We found a lot in Hemphill, 461 North Central Avenue, right on Highway 41, the main north-south thoroughfare connecting Florida to Michigan. The property was across from the brand new Ford Motor Company assembly plant and near the Atlanta airport. Good source of potential customers. The lot measured 50 feet wide and by 100 feet deep and was a sandwich between two houses. One of the homeowners, Mrs. Ruby Hyman, owned the vacant lot and hoped our restaurant would succeed so that we would later buy her house as well. The other next door neighbor was also hoped for future opportunity to sell to us. We eventually bought both of the houses. We bought the lot from Mrs. Hammond for $2,500 and was preparing to build our restaurant when we learned that we had to get property rezoned for business. This was a new concept to us. Ben and I knew nothing about zoning, so we went down to Hemphill City Hall and made our application. The neighbors didn't oppose us, and city approved our requested zoning variance. After that brief delay, we were ready to build. We hired a carpenter to design, engineer, and build the whole thing. Our 7 weeks in short order restaurant business proved valuable at that point. We have seen what worked and didn't in a small restaurant. With our input, the builder drew the plan in one sheet of paper and then went to work for us on cost plus 10-cent basis. Ben and I did much of the manual labor, digging footing for foundations and the like. We worked as fast as we could, generating no income until we opened the doors. We soon ran into another roadblock, a shortage of building materials. The war effort had consumed virtually every scrap of steel and copper in America, and lumber was almost as scarce. Large contractors bought almost everything that was available, and so I had to beat the bushes for material. For $100, I had bought Army surplus Jeep, which I drove from McDonough to Jacksonburg, calling on every hardware store around, buying all the nails they could let me have, usually 5 pounds at a time. Doing the framing would later be covered with walls. Ben and I bought used lumber, and we continued working side by side with our carpenter. As we were finishing the building, we began to look all over for town for used equipment. We bought a stainless steel refrigerator from Majestic Restaurant on the Ponce de Leon Avenue and displayed it proudly. We bought our first grill for $35. Then we found 10 stools and 4 tables with chairs and printed limited menu offering breakfast menu, a small steak, hamburger, and few other items, but no chicken because it took too long to cook. On May 23, 1946, Ben and I opened Dorf Grill, later renamed the Dorf House, with first day sale of $58.20. Our work was just beginning. Ben was married and had a child, which meant the family obligation that I had not yet undertaken. He was go-getter, a winner who worked hard, but more of the responsibility for keeping restaurant open fell on me. I rented a room in the house next door from Mrs. Hammond for $45 a month, so I could make myself available at any time. If the cook or waitress needed me after midnight, they walk across the parking lot and tap on the window. Occasionally, a dishwasher or grill man walked off the job in the middle of the shift, and I would have to get out of bed, put on my clothes, and run the grill the rest of the night, cooking eggs, flipping hamburgers. The parking lot was gravel, so I heard a lot of cars crunching over it in the night. I got out of bed to see what I could do. In those early days, it seemed I grabbed a few hours of the rest whenever I could and spent the rest of my time in the restaurant. Starting the restaurant and pouring all of my worldly possession plus everything Ben and I could borrow into it taught me a full meaning of work commitment. Everything was at stake. I was totally committed at the task of building a successful business, and I knew I could not fail. We were not so committed to financial success. However, we are willing to abandon our principles and priorities. One of the most visible examples of this was our decision to close on Sunday. Ben and I had attended Sunday school and church all of our lives, and we were not about to stop just because we owned the restaurant. Our decision to close Sunday was our way of honoring God and directing our attention to things that are more important than our business. If we took 7 days a week to make a living with a restaurant, then we need to be in some other line of work. Through the years, I have never wandered from that position. Following the example of my Sunday school teacher from my teenage year, I offer my service at the church as a teacher. When I consider the issue we face as teenagers today, we might think that the boys I began teaching in Sunday school half-century ago had it easy. In 1950s, after all, were simpler time. But all the children need a strong role model, other role models, and many of them, even back then, weren't seeing them at home. I enjoyed treating the boys to the dinner at Dorf House on one night during the week. It was a good time for us to get to know each other between Sundays. I was teaching 11-year-old boys in those days. I got promoted a few years later, and I challenged them to read the entire Bible before they finished my class. I promised them a reward if they did. One of the boys who took up the challenge was Harry Brown, a kind of scared little boy who was new to town and slow making friends. I learned that Harry's father was a traveling salesman who went out of town a lot. The year I taught Harry was a tumultuous for him. His father came home from a business trip one night and learned that Mrs. Brown had sold the piano to buy a refrigerator that had been without a refrigerator for several months. In the rage, the father stormed out of the house and didn't return. Mrs. Brown, who had 3 boys under 15 years old, had never worked outside of the home and had no remarkable skills. She went to cosmetology school so that she could get a job to support her family. Harry and several other boys worked hard throughout the year to read the Bible. Each week I asked them how much they had read the week before, and we charted their progress. At the end of the year, I proud the President Harry with his own personal Bible for having completed his reading. We moved out of the neighborhood and joined a different church. So I lost contact with Harry Brown, but I pray that the seed has sowed will make a root and grow. Years later, we opened the Chick-fil-A restaurant at South Lake Mall in Atlanta. A man came to me and introduced himself. It was Harry Brown. He was surprised when I remembered him and the Bible he had earned so many years earlier. We hadn't talked long before I realized that Harry, who worked for Southern Bell, was still reading his Bible and still growing in his message. He and his wife Brenda, after taking foster children into their home for 3 years, were house parents at Christian City Home for Children in Union City, Georgia. They invited me over to meet their children, and I visited them often, usually with a full of Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches. Sometimes I would bring a troubled boy from Sunday school. Harry would tell him about his own experiences with a father who had abandoned him. Harry and Brenda loved working with the children. One day while I was visiting with them, Harry told me, "The longer I live and work with the children, the less I enjoy working at Southern Bell." I did not know then the ratification of the statement. Ben and I had to be patient in early days as we built our business. We didn't have any money for advertising. We had to build our restaurant on satisfied customer one at a time. We were profitable from the very beginning. But the profit was skinny, and we kept our overhead low to maintain it. These days, people come up with a concept for a restaurant chain, borrow as much money as they can, rent a fancy office, and start out with the image of success. Sometimes these high-powered business people find themselves overextended. I liked our concept better. We stay on top of our expenses and never face the bill we couldn't pay. We earn our reputation, good name, relying on Proverbs 22:1. A good name is better to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. People trusted us to pay our debts on time. They learned that I could handle any problem but financial problems. The key to our success, I am convinced, was our commitment. We're fully committed to something. We're not likely to give up or become discouraged, and we are not likely to fail. Commitment work in our business life as well as our relationship with our families and with the Lord. When we are fully committed, strange, unusual things happen. Had I not been fully committed to success of the Dorf House, any of a number of the roadblocks might have put us out of business. Food shortage, a difficult labor market, the need of more customers. Our greatest challenge initially was a limited supply of meat following World War II. We worked with several suppliers, but none of them could fill our needs. They rationed in the amount they could buy, and they wanted to fill the needs of their large, more established customers first. We needed help. I came to know Mr. Winton, who lived in Hatfield and was a manager of Kimball House restaurant at 5 Points in Atlanta. I mentioned our problem to him, and he offered to buy a couple of extra boxes of bacon and sell them to us. Then I learned a slaughterhouse nearby Jonesboro that bought cows directly from farmers and had the beef inspected before selling. I negotiated with them to buy a side of beef. We ground our own meat and cut our own steak and maintained a reputation for good meat and quality food. At the same time, Ben and I began understanding why nobody else was going into the restaurant business in those days. In addition to meeting the challenges of finding food and supplies, the task of keeping restaurant open 24 hours a day, 6 days a week was grueling. Ben and I are working 72-hour weeks or longer. When a grill man or a waitress didn't show up, I find myself working double shifts. Often, I worked 36 hours at a stretch, eating meals between flipping eggs, cutting meats. Sunday became my salvation. I knew I could just make it until Sunday. I'd have a full day to recuperate. People have asked me why we didn't close at night, and the answer is simple. We needed every customer we could get. It was discouraging though to step outside of our empty restaurant at 2 in the morning and stand in the middle of the Highway 41 with no cars in sight any direction. Nowadays, we do more business door house at 3 a.m. than 3 p.m. because of the airport and the four plane companies working different shifts. Our viewers came in the morning when our royal customer gathered for the breakfast and office and coffee. The Dorf House was just a couple of blocks away from City Hall, so city leaders and others would meet at a restaurant every morning. Some people have said that the more real estate deal closed in the Dorf House than at City Hall. I worked hard to memorize the likes and the particularity of our regulars. Many of them would eat at the same thing every day, maybe a sandwich with a mustard or no mayonnaise, or egg cooked in a certain way. One customer always wanted one egg sunny side up and one over light. I began preparing the order when I saw them in the parking lot. I learned that some customers are extra hard to please, so I worked harder to be their friends. I was coming back from the bank one day when customers stormed out of the side of the door. Something had obviously upset him terribly. Is everything alright? I asked. I never eat with you again. He puffed. I've been one of your best customers, but I'll never come back. What's the problem? I asked, trying to settle him down. Well, I came here before another guy, and I was sitting at the corner, and he got a hamburger before I got mine. I offered him a free meal, but once somebody make a statement like that, it's a weeks before he will come back. But eventually, he did, and we didn't speak of the incident again. Our closest competition in the early days were Pete Auntie bus station. Pete was a friend of mine. I ate with him sometimes. He sold the trademark hamburger that was smaller than a bun, and he had a running joke with some customer. Pete, there's no meat in this bun. The customer would say. I took a bite and got no meat. Take another bite, Pete would reply. I still don't have anything meat. You bit over it. Dave Garrett, the longtime CEO of Delta Airline, said he knew only two places to eat in Atlanta, the Dorf House and the Pete's Place. Delta employees knew if they wanted to get to Chief, they should come to Dorf House at lunchtime. We built our business and made friends at the same time, always seeking to meet their needs wherever we could. If we learned the customer was in hospital, we sent the food to the house. Likewise, if a customer died, we sent the food to the family. We still do that. The customer responded with their loyalty. We're now feeding 30 and 4th generation of customer at Dorf House. 3 customers had been so loyal through the years. We gave them a 1946 menu that they can order from anytime. Coffee for a nickel, breakfast for 35 cents, and a waffle for a quarter, and a steak for 65 cents. One of the first people to come to work for us at the Dorf House was Jesse Reed, a black teenager who washed dishes and scrubbed floors and performed numerous other jobs. When Jesse started college about 1948, he suggested I hire his cousin Eddie White as his replacement. I interviewed Eddie and immediately liked him, and I appreciate his commitment to excellence. No matter the job, cutting potato or cleaning the grease trap or reservoir that collected grease or keep it out of the public wastewater, he always did his best work. Although LD was only 12 years old and he was the biggest in many 16-year boys, the government didn't have regulation against hiring preteen to work part-time, and that was a good thing for Eddie's family. Eddie was the oldest of 7 children. His father sometimes worked 2 jobs, and his mother stayed home with the children, taking a laundry or generating additional income. The White family needed whatever income Eddie could generate. I came to learn that they were a close-knit family. Every morning, Mrs. White lit a fire in the wood stove and cooked breakfast for our family of 9 to enjoy together. In the evening, they gathered around the table again for supper and a time for sharing a day's experience. When Eddie turned 16, he could not afford to buy a car, So on weekends, several of our employees, James, Martin, Bill, Adams, and my sister Gladys, would offer him. I often let him use ours. He was the kind of responsible teenager that would all we trust with our keys and know that he would be careful. As he approached his senior year in college, high school, I asked Eddie what he wanted to do when he finished. He said he would become a medical missionary in someday. He wasn't concerned about wealth. He just wanted to help people. But a financial pressure at home led him to consider dropping out of South Fulton High School, working at the door full time and earning his high school diploma at night. I won't have any part of it, I told him. I went to his home and spoke with his father about the importance of education. We worked our plan where Eddie would work after school on weekends 40 hours a week and then contribute half of his income to his family and other half to keep other half. Eddie waited a year after graduating high school to enroll in Morris Brown College. During the interim, I taught him how to be a butcher and how to cook. The waitresses took a mayonnaise jar and made label Eddie's college fund. Whenever the customer would compliment the food, they would say, "The young man who prepared it wants to go to college." People contributed quarters, dollars, and more. And when it came time to register, Eddie counted it. He didn't have all the needed, and I was proud to write him a check to make up the difference. Eddie graduated with a pre-medicine degree but did not have enough money for medical school. He came back to work for us for a year while he earned teacher certificate, then made a successful career in education, eventually becoming an assistant superintendent. More than 50 years after we became friends, Eddie and I have remained closely in touch, relishing each other's successes and sticking by each other during difficult times. The pattern had developed with Eddie continues today. The restaurant business gives us a wonderful opportunity to mentor young people and help guide them toward adulthood. Hundreds of thousands of teenagers have worked at Chick-fil-A restaurant, and I like to think we have been positive influence for each one of them. Chick-fil-A franchises, we call them operators, take special care in selecting and working with teenagers who worked in the restaurant, modeling for them positive character traits. Many of our young employees have been encouraged by their parents to work for Chick-fil-A because of the positive influence of our operators. In 1973, we established the Team Member Scholarship Program to encourage restaurant employees to further their education. In 1996, we replaced the Team Member Scholarship with Leadership Scholarship Program, which places a greater emphasis on the employees' community service and leadership abilities. To be eligible for the $1,000 scholarship, restaurant employees must have completed their high school education, enrolled in college, participate in their schools and community, demonstrate a solid work ethic, and possesses strong leadership abilities, good teamwork, and a desire to succeed. In 1997, we awarded the first Truett Cathy Scholar Award, which provided additional $1,000 scholarship to the top 25 Chick-fil-A Leadership Scholarship recipient each year. According to the Council for the Aids to Education, no other company in terms of the size give as much in the scholarship area as Chick-fil-A Inc. At the beginning of new century, more than 16,000 students have taken advantage of this opportunity. A statue stands in downtown Atlanta to commemorate these scholarship students and the institutions they have attended. The 23-foot tall, 20-foot wide arch sculpture depicts the grand scale people lending hands to each other climb an arch construct of books. The inscription at the base reads, "No goal is too high if we climb with care and confidence." Soon after we opened, Dorf House became a headquarters for school kids. A young boy who was in my Royal Ambassador group at the Baptist church came to work at the original Dorf house, and one afternoon I found him smoking a cigarette in the kitchen. I was greatly disturbed to see this young person developing terrible habits, so I said, I have a homework assigned for you. I want you to take 2 sheets of paper and write a list of advantages of smoking on the one sheet and the disadvantages on the other. Then bring your list back to me tomorrow. I expected him to come back with a long list of disadvantages such as cancer, the needless expense, and no advantages. Instead, he had 3 things listed as advantages. First, he got to take a smoke break. Second, smoking kept him from doing something even more detrimental. Third, he was buying cigarettes from my machine, so I was making a profit. Well, third point really set me to thinking. After all, I made more profit out of that foot of space of the cigarette machine was sitting in than any other square foot in the restaurant. I didn't have to do anything. The cigarette company bought in the machine, serviced it, and gave me a portion of the profit. At the same time, it had led this teenage boy and perhaps others to take up on a deadly habit. It was a difficult decision, but I finally had got to get rid of it. I called the cigarette company and asked them to remove the machine. Through the years, many courtships, some that led to marriages, have started over a Coke and a sandwich at the Dorf house. People still tell me I served them their first hamburger off the grill. Some afternoons I will be the only one, just one straw in my Coke. A customer in the restaurant told me one day, Truett, if you didn't get out and do something courting, you wouldn't ever get married. Well, I wasn't even thinking about getting married. I believed I had more important things to do. About that time, however, I was reintroduced to my childhood sweetheart, Janet McNeil. Looking back at our courtship, it's a wonderful she married me. Most of our dates were spent sipping a Coca-Cola at the Dorf house and dropping nickels into the jukebox. I got off work at 10 p.m. on Saturdays, and sometimes I would take her to a late movie. After a while, she would shake me up to wake up and tell me the movie was over. It was time to take her home. I was exhausted most of the time. Sunday evening was about the only time we had together. I loved Janet, and I believe she loved me. So I made a plan to take a Saturday afternoon off and drive with her to Chattanooga on the presence of visiting my sister Merle. My true intention was to take Janet up on the Lookout Mountain, where we could enjoy a spectacular view and the quiet forest, and I would propose married. We walked through the woods for a while, and I looked for just the right spot. Finally, I stopped, looked at her, and asked her to marry me. She affirmed her love for me, but did not say yes, not yet. On Sunday evening, though alone at Dorf house sipping Coke, as she accepted my proposal. Hoping and believing her answer would be yes, I had earlier bought 60-foot by 125-foot lot on Sylvan Road in East Point to build a home. My brother Horace, who did construction work in his off hours, and I built a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in the time for the wedding on September 19, 1948. The house was nothing fancy, but I was proud to carry Janet over the threshold in my arms. It was a wonderful new beginning for us. Janet made an immediate impact on my spiritual life. For a while, I had been committed Christian. Her level of commitment showed me a new way to live. She hadn't had a father in her home growing up, so she had to rely on the Heavenly Father, committing her life to the Lord when she was 5 years old. Her mother did not attend church, but that didn't keep Janet from getting involved, especially with her singing talent. She also began tithing when she was in elementary school. I had not been a regular tither prior to our marriage, and Janet led me to begin tithing systematically. We had we have enjoyed the blessing of that decision throughout our lives. When we focused when we're focusing on what we can contribute, I learned joy abounds. Sir John Templeton, the financial investment expert and creator of Templeton Fund, tells audience that the safest recommendation and the one that pays the greatest dividend is tithing, giving 10% of your earning to other God the way to fit. I had an opportunity several years to make him and ask myself, and he confirmed the statement and added he had never known anyone who had tithed for 10 years who was not rewarded. My riches are my family and my foster children. I try to store any material wealth in my hands, not my heart, so that I always feel free to give it away when the opportunity rises. And I pray for discernment to know when and how to give. After a magazine article in California misquoted me by saying that I was looking my way to give away money. The request came in so fast that we didn't have time to open all the envelopes. Many of the letters began with "The Lord told me." The one man wrote that needed a new red car with a white top and listed extras he desired. Another wrote, "The Lord told me not to borrow any more money, but to write to you. The Lord said Mr. Cathy is going to pay off my indebtedness." His request was $250,000. Janet also led me into a deeper prayer life. Without ability to pray together, I doubted we could have made it. Prayer changes everything. Prayer changes things. So does encouragement, and Janet has given me abundance of it. When I speak in the groups, I like to ask them, how do you know when somebody needs encouragement? After a moment of silent pondering, I answer, if they're breathing. Everybody needs encouragement, and Janet had encouraged me every day of our marriage. Because I usually work the Saturday evening shift, my brother Ben sometimes would take the afternoon off and go flying. He and Horace both had pilot licenses. On a Saturday afternoon in 1949, Horace and Ben planned to fly to Chattanooga for an air show. Ben finished his shift and completed the report sheet at 2 o'clock, then drove to the airport. They and two other men rented an airplane and took off. Even though weather reports predicted storm moving in, when the sky turned menacing, they landed in the Rome and waited. The storm passed. An hour after sundown, they took off again. Even though my brothers were licensed to fly only in daylight, the plane they had rented did not have the equipment to fly at night. They never made it to Chattanooga. A man on the ground near Dalton saw the plane flying low and signaling SOS with blinking wing light. The man called the state patrol, who quickly organized a makeshift lighted runaway of car headlights in shining on the wide field. My brothers saw the lights and attempted to land, but a wingtip hit the patrol car's radio antenna. Whichever man was piloting the plane gunned the engine to take it back up, and it rose about 30 feet, but then fell flat like a pancake and burst into flames. Ben and Horace, my only brothers, were both dead. The loss hit me particularly hard on Monday morning when I saw where Ben made out a report sheet on Saturday afternoon in good health. I realized again that he would never be back, and my tears flowed. A year later, I bought my brother's share of business from his wife, Eunice, and for several years afterward, I saw that she and her daughter Nancy were provided for. In the meantime, Janice spent many hours in the restaurant doing whatever had to be done to take care of customers, waiting table, running the cash register, whatever was needed. She continued in that role long after our children are born. Business at the Dorf House continued to grow, and I began to look for places to build the second restaurant. I found the ideal location on the corner in Forest Park, across the entrance to the Atlanta Ordnance Depot, where I had served part of my time in the army. If I could open up a restaurant there, I could give folks a good skillet egg and fresh fried bacon instead of those eggs were going in the army tasted like they had been refrigerated for years. I began to research the one who owned the property, but because I didn't have a backlog for the fund, I wasn't rushing the deal. I learned that a man named Yancy owned it, along with the nearby service station. I approached him for selling the corner lot. I owned the land for the years, and Mr. Yancy said, and it's just the beginning. He's sitting there doing nothing. But I sold it to a man 2 weeks ago. Disappointed and curious, I asked, "Would you mind telling me what you sold for?" $3,000. I was surprised that the corner lot sold for so little. I wish I had known about it. I said I could have handed $3,000. The more I thought about the missed opportunity, the more disturbed I became. I began to pray about it, asking God for guidance. With the nudging, I decided to find a purchaser and offered to buy property from him for a profit. So I drove back to the service station as Yancy, who had sold the property to. It was early in the evening before I reached the service station. I pulled the car to the curbside and prayed the guidance direction of what I should do. As soon as I drove into the station, Mr. Yancy came to me and said, "You were the one interested in a piece of property at the corner, weren't you?" "That's right," I said. "Well, the fellow who was going to buy it said he had some unexpected expenses and asked if I could renegate the purchase. If you're seriously interested, then you could have it for the same price I sold it for the other fella." I had to I had to hold back tears. If I had given up not to follow God's urging to go back to see Mr. Yancey, and I would have missed my opportunities again. As we prepared to construct our second Dorf house, I began to understand why the property might have been priced so cheap. The lot had no city or county water line in it, and the well was contaminated. Neither was their public sewage. We cleared the huddle. However, the city extended the water line for us, and we installed the septic tank, which made to be pumped every day. I seemed to be undergoing an endurance test, but we built a customer base. Our children Dan, Don, Baba, and Trudy were born in between 1953 and 1955. So when I left home for the restaurant every morning, Janet had her hands full. As they grew, she would pile them up all into mercury. The boys sometimes fighting like cats and dogs, and brought them to the Dorf house. When they got out of the car, they all knew they couldn't come inside without picking up a discarded can, bottle, or paper sack in the parking lot and putting it in the trash can. They later took on additional responsibilities, such as scraping gum off the bottom of seats and tables with a screwdriver or razor, or restocking the candy display by the cash register. The waitresses, grill man, and the manager became to them Aunt Selma, Aunt Annie, Uncle Henry, Uncle Paul, so forth. The waitress enjoyed playing with the children and sometimes would dress one of them up in a white apron, pulling it all the way to the armpits so that they would drag on the floor. They would then walk over to the table with a pad and a pencil and ask the customer for their orders, then pretending to write it down. The waitress would stand close enough to overhear the order. Sometimes the customer would leave the children a nickel or dime tip. The kids figured out how that worked really quick. On other time, Janet dressed the children as a dwarf and they sang Dwarf House Jingle to customer. We are all family working together. For us, family, business, and church weren't separate aspects of our lives. They all blend in together. Those early experiences shape our children's viewpoint about life and work. Business often remain in our front burner even when we are traveling on family trips. In the early days, we never took entire week off. I couldn't turn the restaurant over to someone else for that long. But we would take off on a Saturday afternoon, head down to Highway 41 for Florida, then return Monday night. We made lots of stops along the way and not just for break room breaks. Whenever I saw fast food restaurant I hadn't had visit, I stopped, went in, observed their operations, taking away ideas on what was and wasn't working. All the time the kids were just wanted to go to Florida so they could jump into the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, they always wanted contests who could see the ocean first. On one trip to Daytona Beach, we were 1 block away from the ocean. I wanted to stop by a steak and shake. They looked particularly fresh and clean. Ah, Dad, came in the chorus from the back seat. We're just a block away. I would just be a minute. I insisted, but they were not convinced. I was true to my words, however, and came out quickly. Thanks, Dad, for not staying so long. But their words did not drip with sincerity. While we were in Daytona, they took more opportunity to say, "Thanks, Dad, for not staying so long in Steak and Shake," as if I would have spent our entire vacation checking out restaurants. The line became a longing joke in our family, and even today, one of the children will say, "Dad, we want to thank you again for not staying so long at the Steak and Shake."